Hello and welcome to the BCMA panel, the Holy Trinity, brands, talent and data. Now, brands using talent is nothing new. From the earliest days of Hollywood in the 1920s, movie stars were mobbed when they appeared in public. Brands saw the opportunity to associate with the new icons of popular culture in order to sell more products. Today, the world of celebrity endorsement has exploded with the rapid and continued growth of influencer marketing and the power of the reality genre across major global broadcast networks. There's also been an increasing number of effective brand and talent partnerships which have reaped great reward. The most successful partnerships are those that are a natural fit and also those that are informed by data. What insights should brands be focusing upon when deciding to take this route to market? And how can brands maximize their return on investment when developing talent partnerships? We've brought together Roman Kemp from Capital FM's Breakfast Show, Sarah Leccacorvi, who's head of content and marketing communications at O2, and Matt Lench, founder of the One Partnership, an integrated agency merging data-driven insight and creativity to optimize the value of talent over the long term. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us something we don't know about them.
Okay, so my name's Sarah Leccacorvi. I'm head of content at O2. So what I'm responsible for is producing pieces of content that support a whole plethora of different communication, from product supports and propositions through to supporting our sponsorships, which is the O2, and the O2 Academies, which is music, as well as the England rugby team. We work very closely with them. We've also got partnerships with the likes of NSPCC. So we produce a suite of content, sometimes one-off pieces, sometimes series, everything from the strategy right through to the production itself, and the distribution of that. And that's what kind of my responsibility is.
Something we don't know about you?
It's not very interesting, but I did think today that I do have a slight obsession with Asian dumplings, as in gyozas. Okay. Because I realise I've got about 40 in the freezer and I don't think that's normal, but I do love a gyoza. I went to Japan last year and I've just become completely obsessed ever since. So literally nobody knows that. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It might be a bit weird, but you know,
okay.
Now it's out there.
It is indeed.
Oh yeah.
So Matt, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? And
I'm Matt Lench. I've just set up the One Partnership, or in the last year I've set up the One Partnership, which connects talent to brands using a deeper insight from first-party data alongside syndicated data and first-party access to really create the brand partnerships that will resonate and ultimately be more effective for both talent and brand. So that's what we do in a nutshell. A fact about me is one that I drop regularly, so it's probably not unknown, is that I've scored a FA Cup first round hat-trick. And as that's not really an unknown fact, I guess another point would be, or another fact, especially with O2 on the phone, is that in the summer on holiday with Roman, I pushed him in the pool and broke his mobile phone. So maybe this relationship with O2 will be a helpful one for the next time that happens. No chance of getting any sort of communication once you've broken your phone in Mykonos.
Well, that's always good to know. And last but by no means least, Roman, tell us about yourself.
My name's Roman Kemp. I'm a broadcaster, television presenter, radio host. I've been doing it for a while. I think I've actually been in the creative industry for 11 years now. I started my actual career in creative world in music about 11 years ago when I was 15. So I guess I would say I've been kind of exposed to it for a long time. Met many different people, worked with lots of different companies. Being a presenter and host as well, you kind of have the opportunity to work across the board in terms of how many companies it varies, and what types of branding, sponsorships or anything you do is so different. Something you don't know about me is that I'm not related to Ross Kemp, which seems to be the majority question that comes in a lot is, are you related to Ross? The answer is no. So clearly that message isn't put out there enough.
Thank you, Roman. That's obviously very good to know that. So let's kick off the discussion about, the question is, how should brands work with talent? I mean, I suppose you're pretty best placed to kick that off. So how do you want to work with brands? How do you see it working best?
It's something that it's getting harder and harder to be different, I suppose. And I think there's a few things that I am constantly kind of pushing against, and the word that every talent, so to speak, or person that you're using with a brand, the word that we all hate, or the phrase that we all hate, and this goes for working alongside Capital for so long, and even working with Capital, a word that I hate is the client has said. And that phrase is it will be the death of me at one point. And I think what a brand has to do is they have to still understand is that even though, yes, they're still, putting money forward, they still have to maintain a good relationship with the talent and, talent with the brand. But what I see a lot is that you get brands who know talent that they're working with and understand what they're good at. And they're not just looking at the analytics and saying, oh, this person does well here, so just take a photo of the product and then that'll be good. It's that for me, and I've done it in the past, but a brand, in my opinion, should never say that that's good enough. A brand should always be willing to, and again, one of the major things that you see is most people, myself included, are just lazy when it comes to working with a brand. You're lazy. Like if someone says, because that thing of the client has said this, or there's you get a brief and there's a million specifications that you have to hit, like in terms of post wording, in terms of shot type, what type of branding is in shot, like all this type of stuff. You then just go, I'll forget it. I'll just post a picture with a product like this, and that'll be me.
Yeah. So it's about the relationship, I guess, is where we're sort of going on in terms of that. I mean, maybe Sarah, you want to come in and give us your view of that.
Sure.
What's your sort of experience in working with talent through with O2?
I think the word that I probably use the most, which probably drives most people I work with crazy, is authenticity. Because I think that, to your point, actually, I only want to work with talent that it complements what we're doing and really is part of what we're doing. So it's less about, and I suppose this also comes to the difference between advertising and content, because quite often brands, from an advertising point of view, will have a product, add a celeb, put them together, create reach, and they think that's just the way it's going to be done. I think with branded content, the difference from what we do is think about who can actually add to the story or the narrative that we're trying to do, who has a real knowledge and the passion point that we're focusing on. So example being, last year was Rugby World Cup. So worked very closely with Hugo Monnier, who's ex-rugby legend. And we collectively actually worked with him to come up with how to navigate rugby in Japan. And we did, the other celeb that we did work with on this was Jamie Lang. And that's because the two of them work really well together. There's great chemistry. And he was kind of the fun character. So he was kind of almost a representation of people who like rugby, but probably maybe watch the World Cup, but won't watch it, every day. And I think something that's really important is that when celebrities are just purely there as a bolt-on, I do agree with what Ronan's saying. It just doesn't work. And I see it time and time again. And even I've had agencies present to me ideas, and they don't always think about some things. Like, I remember once was an idea about, putting Stormzy on a bus and, drive down Trafalgar Square. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's just not feasible. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no reason for him to be there. And I think, going back to my point, circling back to authenticity, is there has to be a reason. Otherwise, why are they there? It's just really, it's not believable. So why should the consumer buy into that?
It becomes more of a stunt rather than, part of a campaign in that respect. I see that.
It's badging. It's purely just badging. It's not there. They're not there to add anything other than their face and their reach, which I don't think is strong enough. Not in this day and age, anyway. I think consumers are wising up to it a lot more now, particularly with influencers. And now, obviously, legally, you have to say if you're there to endorse a product. But I don't think it works as strongly as it used to. I think you have to be a bit more careful.
Can I just have a note on that? Just because I think that what you're saying is right, but at the same time, when it appears as like a bolt-on in terms of like, there could be a brand that I really like, that I really enjoy, and there's full reason for me to be working with that brand. But the brand or the client in that sense are so obsessed with their own messaging getting across that they're being detrimental to their own company by editing the copy a million times. Like I like, for me, when I scroll through an Instagram post, I can see a great post from someone or like a great video, and then I hit the copy, and then that's when I realize it's an ad, because so many brands and groups focus on captions or anything like that, and that kills it straight away. When like, for instance, when I get sent copies, and I'll literally get sent like an Instagram post that is like that long, and it's like I would who
never going to do it.
Who in their right mind posts like that?
I think the key is that both.
Sorry, Matt, you're going. You're gonna.
No. I think the key is that you need to somehow align both brand and talent's objectives, right? And Roman's right. If he has a real affinity for O2, uses O2 day to day, and he obviously doesn't work from the O2, and he has, as I say, like a real a good feeling towards the brand, then the question is, how can the brand build off that? And if they can't in this instance for the communication that they're trying to promote, then in that instance Roman isn't the right choice. But there is always a right choice, and it's just having the insight from both Roman's corner. What is he doing? Yes, engagement rates are always going to be important, reach will always be important to a brand, and various other metrics, but knowing a bit more about where he's going each day, what he's doing, is ultimately the insight that will drive a creative which will be engaging, because the consumer is so much more switched on to what's real and what's not. And I think it's probably a fair call from both sides. At times celebrities can be a little bit standoffish and just take the photo and get it done and take the check. But I think in the good partnerships, it's where both parties really do care. If there's a real affinity from the talent to the brand, they will ultimately want to do a good job, and they'll want to build on that relationship and have it last over a longer period than just that one activation. And I think really that's the key. It all stems back to, if brands are going to work well with talent, it all comes back to ultimately objectives at the top end of that aligning, and then from there you can really build something unique and original and effective.
I think it also goes back to what you were saying about and what we were saying about content versus advertising, because with content is we don't script it. So we just let the talent freely speak in the way that they generally talk. The only way that we'll approach it is that we'll have a discussion about the topics up front. So that's slightly different, where in advertising, it can be a lot more scripted. And to your point, Matt, as well, is equally, I have worked with talent who, you'll turn up on the day and they'll just say, what do you want me to say? And we'll say, just kind of talk around this topic. But they'll say, well, what are the actual words? And so you do get some people where you have to cajole them quite a lot, which can be a bit frustrating, because I did a piece last year and it just kind of, I was a bit disappointed at the end, because I just kind of felt it just looked too addy, and it didn't really feel as relaxed and comfortable as it should have done. So it's really a hard one.
Yeah, but that comes in from, I think the way to deal with that is ultimately getting the right person from the outset. if you've got the right person who you know is right for these reasons, and you've got the sort of first party access, if you like, to them, you know what their personality is, you know what their traits are, and yes, you know where all the other sort of harder metrics lie and what you'd expect from the activation, then you won't be in that situation, because you know you're going to get Roman turn up and you know that he already likes the brand and that he's freely speaking about it, and he will happily freely speak about it because he speaks on the radio every day and he's comfortable in that environment. And yeah, it will be pointers. So yeah, I think the answer to that is have we got the right person at the outset, and if we've not, how do we work on getting the right person?
Yeah, and that's down to data. That's down to the insight from the data. I mean, ultimately, it's a commercial relationship. This is, we're not trying to hide it. And I think that, Sarah's point before is about authenticity, but it's about being honest about it as well, because, in this world of social media, you get found out very quickly anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe Roman, can you talk about some of the relationships you have with brands, and what has worked for you? What have you felt good? Yeah, but just a couple of good examples, just so we can hear.
Just on your note there, just about saying that it comes down to data. Like I do agree, but I also think that you then run a risk of doing something which is hiring a YouTuber, for instance, or hiring someone whose job is literally just to take a photo of something and is famous just because of how they look, which then completely, like, they'll get good clicks, but the connection isn't made between them and the viewer.
I don't think it's down to data, it's down to insight, it's down to understanding. It's merging a real understanding of who the brand is and who the talent is, and not just from a metric point of view, from a personal point of view, from a humanistic side and viewpoint. I think that's what's ultimately important and will lead to a campaign that resonates. And of course, as Sarah, sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. What I was going to say is, I think with, given, for me, there's always, I'll get, likes or whatever, or decent amounts of clicks on X, Y, Z, paid for post. But if the client has pushed it to a point where it's, there's no room to breathe from a talent perspective, like, you've got to stick to the copy, it has to be like this, you can't do anything that doesn't look like an ad, then that connection with your own audience goes. I think, the ones that I think have done really well for me personally, I did one with Smirnoff, which was really nice, and that again was, they looked into who it is that, who are they kind of paying for, essentially, who is the person that they're trying to hire. They came over, they said, look, we're going to film it, we'll take care of the editing, is there anything in the editing style that you'd like us to add? It doesn't feel like, I think from what people forget is that sometimes a brand can just go chuck money at this talent and just tell them to do whatever we want. From a talent perspective, you just go, all right, well, we'll just play it like that then, and I'll just post what you want, and I'm not going to put any effort into it, because you're just looking at me as data, not as a creative person.
But if you're given the responsibility, you're more likely to take that on and
exactly. And with I've done that with Nando's, and with they got me involved in the creative in terms of what would you like to do for an advert, we'll shoot it, all that type of stuff. We've got some ideas in terms of like what you kind of like and what feels natural to you. And it's the same with who did I do it with? I did it with oh dear, I'm just looking through it now. Kellogg's was a really good one. We had a great shoot with Kellogg's. They're a great company to work with. We shot a really nice advert. It was their new cereal that they were going granola fusions, like on the go breakfast thing. Like, it works perfectly with my lifestyle in terms of having to be quickly having to look over in the morning on the day of the shoot. Everything was set out. They gave me those parameters to say, work around it. If there's something you wouldn't say, don't say it. And if you want to ad lib, you can ad lib. I think that was a really nice one. On the flip side, I've worked with brands where it is just taking a photo with a product and you feel bad doing it. Do you know what I mean? And their answer to that is, we'll chuck more money at you.
Okay. I mean, I suppose it works both ways. And I think that, obviously understanding from the talent's perspective and, feeding that in, is really important. So to me, I take from that, it should be a much more collaborative approach rather than just a prescriptive, look, here's the brief, you know, say this, don't say that, you know. But, you know, to me, it's about that relationship where, you know, where we started the conversation. I mean, Sarah, do you have any sort of thoughts about that? Because, you know, we want to talk about what are the sort of emerging trends, you know, where are we going? You know, we've all had a terrible time this year and it's been really challenging and difficult, you know, but, and I've read today that, you know, 2021 is going to be the most important year for marketing that's ever been, because we're, you know, we're now looking at, you know, hopefully a much more positive outlook. What are your thoughts?
2020 as well, Andrew.
Yes, probably.
2019 is wrong with that.
I think relationship with talent is really important. I mean, and I wholeheartedly agree, because the best work I've ever done is when the talent have been involved from the very, very beginning. And where sometimes it gets a bit tricky when you have some talent which are very time poor, and they just want a bit of direction. But I think trying to find that right talent you can build a relationship, bring them in at the start, is by far the best. Sometimes what I've actually done is kind of like screen tests before, where just to kind of see how they get on with, if there's a chemistry, if there's got a general interest, and have actually eliminated people sometimes that way. In terms of emerging and how things are going, I think it's a boring word I keep saying, is this whole authenticity piece again, because I think now there are so many creators and makers out there producing their own content that actually you don't necessarily need a brand to endorse things anymore. Like Gary Barlow's did amazingly at the start of lockdown, producing his own content. He doesn't need someone like O2 to sponsor him to do that, because he's actually done it off his own back. So I think there needs to be a real role. I think people going forward particularly want brands to have more, they want to achieve more things. So less about, I want to sell this product. Actually, so from an O2 point of view, how can we support emerging talent in the music industry? Because we've got all the venues, which they're shut to be fair right now, but you know, when they open up, how can we support them in their performances and giving them the time and support to do that, versus just be a facilitator of giving them tickets? So how can, even as a telco, as a connector, how can we bring people together a bit more during, you know, which have existed during these difficult times? So I think it's about brands being really true to what their core values are and actually living them and doing things by them, as opposed to just saying it and as I was saying before, just kind of badging it. I just think we have to be very careful now about social media. Now there's so much out there, there's so much competition that people just aren't going to be interested in brands unless there's a real valid purpose and role that they're going to achieve.
I think social responsibility from brands has become, I mean, obviously with what's happened with COVID, it's become very, very important to them, and that will live on into 2021 when everyone decides what their values really are and the areas they want to support, whether that be minority groups, whether that be, you know, the NHS, whatever it might be. In Tesco's case, I know they're doing stuff with food banks off the back of Marcus Rashford and what have you. Like, I think brands will find what their role and responsibility is. They'll decide what that is, and that'll become a massive part of communications next year. I also think that longer form content will sort of become will have a bigger role. I think it went shorter form probably for the last 2-3 years whilst social's grown like it has and what have you, but that was all very product and price value driven, you know, can we drive sales? Whereas I do think we're going back to a place where longer form content that maybe sort of drives brand values. I know I was speaking to Unilever the other day, and they've done something that's gone out on, I think it was on Apple, Will Smith, and it's got nothing to do with any of their products. They've advertised it and they've done a lot of editorial around it to allow people to know that it's them producing that content, but the actual content itself doesn't have any Unilever product in and doesn't push their agenda in any way, shape or form. And I do think there'll be more of that, using channels to promote content and their role within that content, but not the actual content itself, and keeping that original and organic and as Sarah said, authentic. I think
we did some longer form, quite a lot of longer form content actually last year, and I have to say it did perform very well to a point. And sometimes you would see the views would drop off. Like we done the rugby tour, was each episode was nearly 10 minutes long, and sometimes the viewer was viewing right through to 5 minutes, which actually is, for branded content, is really, really long. And it's to your point, it wasn't really just about, oh, and here's this telephone. Actually generally was about rugby culture in Japan. And we'd also done a piece of work last year around passion points. So there was this lady from Essex who groomed dogs. She would colour in poodles in pink, and there was this really eccentric guy who was an absolute car enthusiast. And the pieces of content really focused on their passion points, and that again they had really good view through rates. People were enjoying it much more, and I suppose that's the one thing that a brand can do. We can kind of afford to produce some of this really interesting stuff, and distribution as well. We can get it more now on some of the broadcasters. YouTube's been great for us. It's becoming a much more accessible than it used to be before.
Yeah, I feel like distribution's always been the hurdle, hasn't it, to producing this longer form content, but now you own your own distribution channels on the likes of YouTube and what have you. So that opens up the possibility to just going out there and producing the content that you want to produce, and not having to get a production company or a broadcaster to commission that. You're working off your own agenda as opposed to their agenda. I think that's probably quite important as well.
You're right. And actually from a brand point of view, so actually I've been challenged in my role to actually fight for that distribution, because you're absolutely right, distribution is one of the hardest things. Because when you look at our media spend, you know, you've got a big chunk of that is for advertising, because that is our bread and butter. We do need to sell connections, but actually trying to have some money put aside to distribute content is quite a tough nut to crack. But I think when the brands can see as a benefit in it, because with ad blockers and the like and GDPR, people are tuning more into content, and therefore people are pulling it more towards themselves, that whole classic pull push analogy. So because people are consuming it more, we are being able to get more funding to distribute the content that we're producing.
I'd be interested to know from your perspective, Ro, whether, you know, if a social deal comes across the table versus probably a longer form piece that's, in terms of financially, it's not massively more valuable, what you'd be more inclined to do. It might take slightly more time, but potentially to build your own brand a little bit more, it might drive that connection between the brand you're working with and yourself, and it might then lead to something that would ultimately last longer term, which I imagine would be quite appealing to yourself.
Much more beneficial.
Like Matt's more than aware. Like, you know, I've had I've got, you know, brand sponsorships that, you know, the brand association thing is massive, you know, and if you've got a talent with a decent enough agent, the agent will be in their ear saying, look, these are the deals that are on the table, but this one is a great brand association. It matches really well with your audience. It's something that you'll enjoy doing. It's a brand that doesn't look eggy for you to be next to. But it, you know, and do you know what I mean? It'll get a lot more enjoyment out of it.
I'll ask you, what is an eggy brand?
Eggy brand.
I would suggest you don't reply.
Oh, I don't care.
Feel free.
No, I guess, you know, for argument's sake, luckily I've never done one of these, but like a teeth whitening thing, or like do you know what I mean? Or like a muscle tea or something is not what we want to be doing.
Muscle tea.
Unless they're offering substantial money.
I mean, that wouldn't be believable. If you were having a muscle tea, if you were doing a muscle tea, it wouldn't be believable.
Exactly. But that's what, you know, like those are like, why is that person with that brand? You know, it doesn't make sense. And don't get me wrong. Like, I've done it in the past, and this year, I think this year you look at a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent, especially TV talent, they have to do it because brands want to get their money out. From a talent perspective, you know, from a talent union perspective, there's not as many jobs out there.
Yeah.
So people,
I think there's always got to be that balance, hasn't there, between
responsibility of the brand, though.
Absolutely.
To make the right decision. I think. I mean, if you're going to put, it's difficult. It's very easy for us to sit here and say, you know, that doesn't make sense. Like, why has that person done that partnership? I know it's not believable. But when you put money in front of someone, for doing in many cases very little, it's hard to say no. You know, people have got families to feed, they've got their own backs to cover. So I do think it's the brand's, it's got to be the brand's decision, and it's got to be on them that they're picking the right talent and talent that works.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that
I think they need to, brands probably need to justify their decision. And look, you know, guys, we're coming towards the end now. I'm just going to sort of finish off with a little view to, you know, what this looks like for the future. You know, are you positive? You know, what, Roman, for you, would you like to see brands thinking, you know, maybe one thing they might want to change? Sarah, your perspective, what do you think about the talent? And Matt, you know, from, you know, what about the data side of things? So let's just finish off on those sort of comments. So I'll start with Roman.
Yeah, I would say, you know, from a positive point of view, like I've seen more so now, and I like it. It's always the bigger brands that know how to do it, and the bigger brands, they've got that, you know, big paycheck. And sometimes when you get a brand that has a big paycheck that doesn't really know what to do, they'll end up kind of just chucking money at you and saying, look, do this, and we can ask you, get you to do this because we're paying you enough. Whereas on the flip side, the bigger brand will go, look, we're paying you big money, but it's going to require more work, but you'll enjoy it. You'll still enjoy it. You'll still get that value out of it. For instance, I did a 3-day shoot in Manchester with my dad, and we shot the Volkswagen advert.
Oh yes,
and that was a fantastic advert. Like, it was really nice. It was a great, you know, like, to be honest, like, you know, the deal itself was you know, substantial, but there were still like limitations in place. Like, you know, there's still like you know, you can't go to a competitive brand for X amount of time. You know, you're loyal to that brand for a while. There's a lot of kind of like restrictions, but we loved the content, me and my dad. We loved the idea. It looked like they put a lot of effort into it. They understood who we were as people. And it made for us to want to get involved even more. And when they said, you know, you got to travel up to Manchester, you shoot on from this hour to this hour, you're like, yeah, great, let's do it. You know, and it's the same with, I recently did one, you know, and arguably, you know, I've done things with Cadbury's in the past where I've then gone back and said, look, why not, let's just pull me in a little bit earlier and we can work on making something fun.
Yeah, so like a true collaboration. And that's what it's down to. That's great.
Yeah, and I ended up doing a great live Street Fighter tournament with my mum.
You go the extra mile, absolutely. And I think that's key. So what about you, Sarah, from your perspective?
I think from my perspective, I mean, first I have to say, I absolutely love working with talent. It's probably one of the best things of my job. The creative product, bringing the talent together, is so much fun. And I've worked with some amazing people, some really exceptionally talented people. And what's I love is when I meet them, I'm like, this is why you are who you are, because you are just so good. And it's almost intimidating sometimes. And I think being able to work collaboratively with someone makes a whole host of difference. It actually makes my job easier. So I love it. You know, when I have talent that, you know, they turn up late, they're tired, they're not interested, that they want me to, you know, literally word for word, it's tough, you know, and it just feels, to your point, Ryan, it just doesn't feel right. But when it does work, which I have to say, and I've worked with a lot of talent, from your Gallaghers, your Bublé's, your Jamie Langs, who's in Strictly right now, your Sarah Cox, you name it. I've done quite a lot. 90%, if not 95%, it's always absolutely excellent. It's a brilliant experience. And I think also building up those associations is great. I think the other thing is that working with talent really helps with like brand recall, building brand equity, achieving reach. And you just can't do that alone unless you've got a serious lot of money to put in your distribution. And I think so, therefore, you have to work really, really well with talent, and they do add an awful lot to everything that you're doing. And I think that right now we're at a time where it just seems to work for brands and talent to work closely together. It's working for us in lots of different guises, from music and rugby through to our partnerships like with the NSPCC, and actually work with influencers. We've not really spoken too much about influencers, and those people are really passionate. Some of them I've met, we're doing a piece on mums and children. They were so passionate about their field. You know, I could just sit there and listen to them all day long. It adds so much quality to my day, I have to say. So I think, you know, long may it continue. I think, boring as I keep saying, as long as it's authentic.
Yeah.
Totally
I'm gonna.
talked about content.
I think I'm going to call you Authentic Sarah now. That's it. That's going to stick.
I think
So,
you should change
Matt, I'll give Matt the final word. Go on then.
I think you should change the name of the piece. Just call it authenticity.
Authenticity.
And Sarah, you've worked with all that talent. I'll be looking forward to seeing the 2021 partnership with Roman. But
move on.
I'll take that 5 minutes late.
But what I think will happen through 21 into 22 and onwards, really, I think brands will want more of an evaluation. They'll want to know where their money's going, and they'll want a real rationale for using that talent. I think that they will use that evaluation to build longer term relationships between the talent and themselves. And I think that because consumers are becoming so much more aware of being targeted for advertising, I think those longer term relationships are going to be the ones that ultimately will be successful and provide that effectiveness. And as I said earlier, I think longer form content that is less addy will play a massive part. I think that there'll be multi-platform more than just social and just this. I think communications for talent, there'll continue to be a lot of money spent, probably more money than ever. It's become a physical part of each brand's plan, or certainly the bigger brand's plans each year, whereas it was just sort of a sidebar where money maybe went when there was a bit left over. Now it's a very important factor within the communications, and I think that will continue, but I think it will continue to build across platform. I think it'll be, yes, social deals, but TV deals, YouTube deals, longer form content on the likes of YouTube and what have you, and more editorial going alongside it as well. So I don't think a lot will change, but I think it will gradually go towards a place of more accountability and more creativity. And I think insight will drive that creativity, in my opinion.
You're right. I think accountability is absolutely critical. When we're talking about huge investments, I think what I've learned out of this is it's got to be less addy, less eggy, more accountability. Just some of the key words that have come out of this session, guys. So I just want to thank our panelists, Roman Kemp, Sarah Leccacorvi, and Matt Lench, for their fantastic insights and valuable discussion points, which I hope you enjoyed. So thank you for listening, and see you again soon.